Hello and welcome to Getting Lost with me and my good friend.
Dan, who is completely lost about Lost.
Okay, so now we're on to episode 8, Confidence Man.
Yep.
So this is the tale of Sawyer.
Tale of Sawyer, yeah. Straight off the bat, I did not like this episode. That's what I would say straight away. And I think there's a few different reasons for that. I think, A, I don't like the character of Sawyer. And I don't think this episode really improved my liking
Your opinion
as
of
a
him.
character. Both in terms of like him as a character himself, but also like the way it's been written, so he's been written so far. And I didn't like what they did with a lot of the other characters in this episode as well, which just seemed contradictory to what we've so far learned about characters. It's like they've just done sort of did various bits and pieces. I just like, I didn't like that. Look, like, what's going on here? It just doesn't fit in my understanding of a lot of them, type thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, it definitely was one that I left dissatisfied having watched it.
So I guess first question then, I guess, at what point did you put like two and two together about the letter that Sawyer has?
I don't think I put together the whole thing until it's effectively explained. Sees the kid and pulls out of the deal, and then it's literally explained by Kate. And I think part of the issue is that that's supposed to be like the reveal in the episode, in that he's actually got a conscience, but it's almost like literally nothing we've seen actually suggests that. And it's like, if this happened to you as a kid, why on earth are you now doing it yourself, type thing? It just doesn't seem to all add up, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. Yeah.
It's like, at the moment, and it may well be that I need more of Sawyer to sort of understand the arc, but as it stands at the moment, first of all, I think I've had a problem with the Sawyer character for the last few episodes, because it doesn't seem to fit to me that it's taken this long for all of the other characters to just get into a massive conflict with him. Because I think in any kind of like survival situation like this, if there's one jerk who's just like hoarding stuff, this isn't going to go down well. This isn't going to be something that's sustainable in any way, shape, or form. It's like, no, we need to at least inventory all the stuff we've got, rather than, oh look, it's another episode where Sawyer's got the one thing we want because he's hoarding everything.
That is one thing where you do wonder. It's like, we've had a couple of episodes where there's been issues where Sawyer's had something, or they think Sawyer's had something because they thought he had the water and he didn't.
Yeah.
But they know he's hoarding stuff. And you are like, well, why are they letting him
do that? Yeah.
Keep hoarding stuff.
Because he's not going to be, it's one of these where he's not going to be able to survive on his own, because, and it just, to me, there's just no way that the character like that in that particular situation would be allowed by the rest of the group to continue as he is for that length of time. And the fact you've already had at least 2, possibly 3 previous conflicts about him hoarding stuff and stealing stuff, and it's mine. It's like, really? So I kind of, like, up to this point, not particularly liked him as a character, because he just doesn't seem realistic in terms of how everyone else would interact with the guy being this kind of jerk all the time. And the arc that you have in this one is basically sort of showing him sort of doing his confidence hustle type thing. And the only real reveal is that, as a kid, this was done to his parents and they all died and he's traumatized by it. And you're therefore missing the sort of whole, well, why on earth did he go off and do it type thing? He sort of gives this kind of explanation, I got into trouble and owed $6,000 to someone, so I did this type thing. And, all you're really getting from it is that he's someone who does this stuff and hates himself because of it, but yet is seemingly just his solution to hating himself is to embrace it more and more.
I think possibly the moment that really kind of, or I guess for me, kind of makes it work is when obviously they've had the bit of the tussle and Saeed accidentally stabs him.
Yeah.
And Sawyer's telling Jack to just let him die. And I think that's the kind of bit for me that kind of makes it work. Like, Sawyer hates himself so much that he's pissed everybody else off deliberately. and is now just like, or it seems to be hoping that they are either just going to abandon him or kill him in some way, because he appears to have just given up on himself, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say it just to me it just didn't seem to quite work. And maybe when you learn more about the character, it'll come together a bit better. But yeah, I just found it really hard to sort of get behind. Okay, this is it's like the flashbacks told a very small portion of his previous life type thing, and all you've got else to work with is the contents of the letter, and you haven't yet got the link between baby not Sawyer, whatever his name is. I guess that's a new mystery. What is Sawyer's actual name? Adult Sawyer, who hates himself but is doing all of these cons and being a jerk to everyone and trying to be hated. And it's also a really weird disposition, because you've got he wants to be hated by everyone, yet his confidence scams are basically based around the idea of getting people to like him. So it's all very difficult for me to sort of fully get my head around. And so, yeah, it didn't do anything to really make me like the character anymore. And I think he needs more development and to change a bit. And maybe if you have a couple more episodes focusing on him a bit more, you might get somewhere. But at the moment, it was just like, no, yeah, don't like it.
Yeah, fair enough. I think probably of the initial cast, he probably is the one that is hardest or the least likable from the start, because everybody else has a kind of very obvious sympathetic kind of bent to them. Because even Kate, even though we're told we're a criminal, it's kind of implied that it's like a wrongful accusation of some kind, or she did it for some kind of well-meaning reason. Whereas, yeah, Sawyer, we're basically just presented with this guy who's a bit of an a-hole.
Yeah. And I think the thing is that it's not just about him. Like, you can have unsympathetic characters and them work well. It's just that, as I say, I can't, in my head, he just doesn't quite fit in terms of the interactions with him and, how he acts throughout the whole thing so far. It's like, I don't quite believe this character as of yet in terms of what I know about him. It just doesn't quite work. Which suggests there's possibly other stuff to find out about him that might make it work. But until that happens, it's just like, I don't like the writing on this guy.
Yep. I think this week it does bring out some interesting things it does help us learn some more about Saeed.
Well, this is probably the other bits that I didn't like about the episode, was like you've got a few big interactions that take place, mainly around Saeed, which again sort of kind of seem to fly in the face of what we'd kind of established with characters so far. So you've got Saeed, you've got the sort of, you knew that he was in the Iraqi Republican Guard, but he seemed like a pretty decent fella type thing, and all of this sort of, and then suddenly he's like, oh yeah, pretty much expert torturer, used to do all this stuff, and it's like, okay, that was a little bit out of left field. It's like, let me handle the horrible torturing type stuff. Which, seems like it was just a sort of bit of a convenience thing that like, we need to have this conflict going on and all this sort of bits and pieces. And I guess it kind of insulated Jack from having to do it in some way, shape or form. Clearly Jack and Sawyer had been butting heads for a while yet, and that at least made sense in my mind. But yeah, the sort of escalation of Saeed from what he was to what he apparently had been doing just seemed a little bit hard to believe. But I think the bit that got me the most was actually the Locke, the way Locke's character acts in this particular episode. So there's the big thing where Saeed goes to Locke to basically say, oh, what were you doing at 5 p.m. when the rockets go off type thing. And the only way I can view that conversation where Locke basically implicates Saeed and implicates Sawyer and hands Saeed a knife. And like, it just, it seemed so fake almost. It's like, oh yeah, well, what if he did a timed fuse type thing? And he's very specific about, if you'd seen TV, you could do it with a cigarette. And you're just like, I feel like you're just making this up specifically to again, that's a side of Locke that we haven't seen at all. Like every other interaction that we've seen with Locke, he's generally been at least kind, considerate. You know, he tries to help Charlie, he tries to help Walt, he helps Michael with Walt, all the other bits and pieces. And then you suddenly got this, like, and the way it was shot and the way it was done just seemed like a really dark, sort of deliberate.
But in my mind, like, Locke is always this character who always has had or always does have this kind of dark edge to him, where it's like, it's not necessarily, it's hard to describe, but it's got like a kind of steel side where he will do kind of.
Yeah, but I think it's that like the only way in my head I can accept, I can rationalize, okay, that like interaction, the way it all panned out was that Locke had to be the one who'd hit Saeed over the head. That was the only thing that I could deduce from that, because it was such a, I'm deliberately going to incriminate this person type thing. That was the only way I could kind of view it. And it didn't make a huge amount of sense in my head. It was like, okay, you could do a delayed fuse, but if he was 2 kilometers away, you'd have to have a very long delayed fuse, and you'd somehow have to manage to pull it off to a reasonably tight timeline in terms of what was going on. And it wasn't like it was like, oh, we're going to do it at 5 o'clock exactly. It was we're going to do it at 5 o'clock. I'm going to fire my rocket first, and then you guys fire your rockets afterwards type things. Like, no, this doesn't add up in terms of, there's no way in my head Sawyer would have done it. And there's no way Locke would know enough to like literally point the finger directly at him and literally hand a knife to the guy in terms of doing it.
It's a reasonable question to ask, because we know, Locke obviously likes being on the island because he's not injured.
That's it, because part of the conversation was, he sort of says, he actually gives this is what your suspect would look like, effectively. It's someone who's benefiting from being on the island, someone who doesn't want to leave, and you just go, well, that's you, because you can walk again.
and we know Locke wasn't helping like dig the cave out. So there is a reference actually in the previous episode where somebody says, I think where Walt says, let's go get Locke, and somebody does say he could be anywhere.
Yeah, so and it's interesting because if it is Locke, it kind of makes sense, because Locke doesn't know about the transmission. So the cover story effectively was that it wasn't that Saeed was going to try and find this transmission on the island. It was like he was going to do something to send a distress message. So, okay, if he wants to stay on the island, it would make sense that he'd want that not to happen type thing. There's a few bits that don't quite add up in terms of, well, he definitely was skinning the boat at a reasonably close period of time to that, because Charlie saw him there. He'd had to track down where Saeed was in a very short space of time, and okay, he may have the skills to do that type thing, but yeah, the only way it made sense to me, that whole interaction, is that it's basically pointing Locke did it, and he's clearly trying to incriminate the guy he doesn't like type thing, and the guy that Saeed would naturally believe would have done it type thing. The other thing I'll just mention it because I don't think it's necessarily significant, but it was interesting in my mind, was that when Saeed gets hit over the head, he doesn't actually know about Jack in the cave, and he doesn't actually know that Sawyer is the only one left to do the rocket, because when he left them, it was Kate and Sawyer. So presumably I don't think there's anything to that, because my assumption is that as time has passed, he's gotten, Jack has treated him, he sort of found out what's gone on and has realised, oh, it can't be Sawyer, because Sawyer was the only one left, having realised that Kate had gone back to the cave type thing. But yeah, it was just interesting that A, in the previous episode, you don't see Sawyer actually launch the rocket because of the way they edited it, and B, as a character at that point in time, he wouldn't know that Sawyer was the only one who could have done it type thing. You've also got the fact that, just thinking about it now, like, Locke's story does not make any sense at all in terms of, oh, he would have done a timed fuse type thing, because he didn't just have to launch the rocket. He had to launch the rocket and switch the thing on.
Yes.
So, again, it's like he's crafted this story, which is very, very specific about,
Well, I guess I guess Locke wouldn't know that, but I guess it could still make sense because if it was Sawyer that hit Saeed, then you would assume he wouldn't be worried about switching the thing on. He would just be worried about launching the rocket because the plan would be for Sawyer theoretically to launch the rocket and then club Saeed before Saeed even really has a chance to realize.
But we saw
not on.
that Saeed had basically got the signal. So, before he gets knocked out, he's like, "Oh, I've got the signal. I can now." Yeah, this was the thing that again slightly annoyed me because, liking the character of Locke, I didn't really perceive Locke as the sort of person who would basically just throw Sawyer completely under the bus, and the only way it makes sense is if he'd done it, which at least sort of gives him a rationale behind it. But it was one that I was like, would he really have gone off on his own, and somehow known all the timings and all the other bits and pieces to do it? But it's the only way this interaction makes sense in my head. So it's like not quite adding up.
Yeah. Well, welcome to Lost, where you watch things and you go, that doesn't add up, and you're like, will it make sense later? And then sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, I'll be intrigued to see what you make of this one as this develops.
Right. Okay.
And I was just going back to Saeed. I think although you do get that kind of reveal that he was a not very nice man in the past.
Yeah.
The episode does finish with that part where he's saying, "If I can't, I promise myself I wouldn't be that person. If I can't do that, then I can't be here."
Yeah, it's something like, I swore I'd never do it again type thing. And he's goes off to map the island, which I feel is probably going to be an important thing. I'm assuming we're going to see him again relatively soon. So I think his last line is, I hope we meet again, which is sort of a little bit of an ominous way of saying goodbye type thing.
Don't know where, don't know when. Elsewhere in the episode, it's not a huge amount going on, actually, I don't think, this week, like away from the main stories. You have the Claire and Charlie's kind of
and I liked that relationship. I thought that was it was a nice follow-up from the previous Charlie focused episode, because while it didn't really advance much, it was just like, it was a nice set of interactions, and it was Charlie almost being like what you'd envisage the Charlie previously, like prior to his rock god status, to be like type thing. So it was a nice follow-up that, okay, like, he is trying to sort of become something different type thing.
Again, you have a bit more of Sun coming out of her kind of isolation a little bit more, because she's the one that in the end helps Shannon.
Yeah.
She basically stares down Jin at that point where like Michael's giving her the plants that she needs. Yeah,
that again is a good sort of continuation of that bit which we saw in the previous episode. And was it the one before that? Was the House of the Rising Sun, or was it two before that? I can't remember.
So last time was Charlie's, and then the House of the Rising Sun was the one before.
Yeah.
And apart from that, I think I did make a note of the line from Hurley that I did like, where he's watched Jack like help Shannon breathe, and Hurley's like, that was a Jedi moment.
Yeah. And that's the they clearly got a Star Wars theme going on, because there was a Star Wars reference in the previous episode as well, with when Charlie gets into the cave and like, I'm here to rescue you type.
Oh right, yeah.
There was one of those, and
well, I guess you can argue they're going for a whole like light side, dark side.
It could be what with the white and black bits and pieces going on,
black pieces everywhere.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that throwing the occasional pop culture reference type stuff. I quite like the like Hurley basically having a go, like responding back to Charlie as well about the fat guy hoards food.
Oh right, yeah.
It's got a great. It's just a little bit sort of comedic moment, but it's sort of it's set up nicely, the whole Charlie and the imaginary peanut butter.
This is why I wanted to do this, because it's fascinating to hear you kind of react to like characters that you don't like, or where you've kind of spotted things that you're kind of thinking, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Which, as I say, is kind of, that's the roller coaster.
But that is a roller coaster of Lost, isn't it?
Of Lost. It's like sometimes it's like, that doesn't make sense, and then like a few weeks later you're like, well, now it does. Or like you get to the end of the season and you're like, wait, hang on, that still doesn't make any sense.
Because I'm just trying to think. So we've had, we started off with, we're on episode 8, and ignoring 1 and 2. So we've had 6 character episodes, which have been Kate,
So we've
Jack,
had Jack, Kate, Sawyer,
Sawyer,
Sun and Jin,
Jin, Charlie,
Charlie,
and Locke.
and Locke.
Yeah.
So you've not really had stuff so far on Claire, on Michael and Walt,
Yeah.
on Hurley. I think that's it from the main. Shannon and Booth, you've not had anything on.
Yeah. Shannon and Booth, the most incompetent lifeguard.
To be fair to Boo, in the last couple of episodes, he's been quite competent.
He got himself beaten up. That was the extent that he did this episode.
He helped with the digging out like the week before.
When you say help.
Well, yeah, I say help, and I don't think we actually ever see him doing any.
Yeah, I mean, he was supposed to be doing the rocket thing and doing something helpful. Then he sort of goes, "Oh no, I must help with the digging out." Don't actually see him do any digging. He probably just hung around and was like, "I can find some pens."
Strike that. Don't be fair to Boo. Be fair to Shannon though. Shannon's showed some.
Shannon has at least been useful. She speaks French, so they are able to understand the thing.
He launched the rocket on.
Yeah.
She managed to, do her breathing.
Do her breathing. Manipulated Charlie into getting her a fish at one point.
At one point, yeah.
Basically, far better than Boone.
She's doing it with a handicap of severe asthma.
Yeah. Although there was quite a nice little, so just a couple of bits and pieces that I sort of jotted down. Obviously, this episode we learned that the equipment was destroyed, which I think we kind of talked about last episode.
Yeah.
It's an important realization that it's
adds to that kind of little bit of mystery of who hit Saeed.
Yeah, it's sort of
like why did they want to destroy the stuff?
Yeah. You then got there was a nice line from Jack when Kate sort of says, "Why haven't you beaten up essentially Sawyer yet?" Where he says, "We're not savages, Kate, not yet."
Yeah.
It's the not yet is the sort of not quite a nice little bit.
A little bit of a, I guess, a Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And the other thing that was sort of a little bit in your face, and difficult to say it's going to go anywhere, but the whole Watership Down thing, which Watership Down is a survival type book type thing. So I kind of wonder if that's going to be referenced somewhere along the line.
Yes, yeah, I made a note of that. I'll have to read up a little bit. It's been a long time since I read Watership Down.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't immediately think of what the comparisons would be, but it's one of those, they picked a book for a specific reason, and usually writers.
They wouldn't have picked that by random, and I suspect it would have been picked for more than having Sawyer say it's about bunnies.
Yeah, that's it, because it was probably even that line. It's the fact that you get the Kate picking it up, looking at it very specifically, showing you the cover type thing, and the kind of the very dismissive way about the story that Sawyer says, "Oh, it's about bunnies," when it's clearly not really about bunnies. Is the whole thing about Watership Down? So
yeah, they made it very clear that they had picked this particular book, and they didn't just reference.
Yeah,
it wasn't just a book; it was this specific book.
Yeah. So it's one of those, from a writing point of view, you kind of think, there's going to be something there. But I can't quite put my finger on it, because while it is a sort of survival situation, it's very much about a journey rather than, well, I say it's the first half of the book's all about a journey, and then the second part's about sort of establishing a home. So maybe it's the establishing a home thing that...
And I guess maybe it feeds back into the whole thing of there being like good, like, good and evil, because from memory, like, the book does have like an evil rabbits. Yeah,
there's the evil rabbit colony, I'll call it, type thing.
And I guess there's quite a lot about in it about faith and like kind of the rabbit god. I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of religious allegory in it. That's the thing. But again, I can't put my finger on anything that it immediately comes into. But it might be one of these where after we get
I would say one of those things that slowly will build up across the series is this idea of a good versus evil, almost kind of biblical style.
Yeah. I jotted two things down that I don't really have a reason why I thought about them in this episode. But thing one is like, I can't tell if Sawyer's name is supposed to be his surname or his first name.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's supposed to be a surname.
Yeah, because that means that only because Locke and Sawyer are therefore the two characters that get referred to by their surname.
Surnames, yeah.
Everyone else is first name basis, and I don't know why I jotted that down after this one, but this was just like one of the why does what like I can't even I don't know what their first names are.
Yeah.
Interesting that when everyone else is.
You do have Locks.
Well, I probably have, but I've forgotten what it is.
Because it's John Locke. Because Locks is in his flashbacks. People are calling him John.
Okay.
Whereas, Sawyer's you don't have at all because nobody calls him by his first name.
No, it's just literally Sawyer, and that's kind of an interesting thing. And I don't know what it's about, but it in your head it does create a little bit of distance between those characters and the others because first name basis is obviously more friendly and colloquial. Yeah. So there's that little bit of pieces. The other thing I jotted down, it might just be me, but I was like Sawyer's propensity to give people nicknames. Like
yes, yeah, that's a Sawyer trait, definitely.
Yeah, and like the one that I jotted down, I was like, why is he called Kate Freckles? She's not particularly freckly. This is the bit I was like,
no, yeah.
I sort of like. I was like thinking about it. I was like, I'm just going to Google what's the name of Angelina Lily type thing. It doesn't seem like she's got freckles. It's like there's certainly not a decisive trait of her, but
no, yeah, that is true. I think the main point is he's just being condescending. Maybe they originally cast like a more freckly actress.
Yeah. No, we can't change the script.
And that was Confidence Man. Join us next time for Golf, Voices in the Jungle, and The French Lady. See you next time.